And welcome to the Beyond the Drills Coach Education webinar. My name is Steve Whelan, and welcome to either My Tennis Coach Academy or mytenniscoaching.com. This is a recorded webinar based on my very popular face-to-face coach education webinar, Beyond the Drills, that I'm currently delivering across the UK. Just a little introduction to who I am. Obviously, Steve Whelan. I've been coaching out tennis for 22 years. I know I don't look it. I know I look still 21, but unfortunately, I'm 41. I've been coaching straight out of school, straight into coaching. My pathway into coaching wasn't traditional. Played tennis as a hobby. Had 2 tennis lessons, I think, top of my head, 2 private lessons over the years. Tennis was a game that I played in the off season. We'll get sort of what sports I played in a few moments. But yeah, not a really traditional route. Wasn't a player. Wasn't really heavily involved in tennis a lot. Played it mainly in summer, Wimbledon time, the off season for my sort of main sports. Got into coaching at 16 and pretty much coached the same way from what was around me. I literally just copied what the other coaches in and around me were doing. And over the past 10 years, been a coach developer as well. So I've worked in coach education now for 10 years and deliver LTA qualifications, so the Lawn Tennis Association here in the UK, and deliver coach qualifications and CPD. And over the past couple of years, been releasing a lot of my own content as well. So some of you may be familiar from me from Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where I deliver sort of my own thoughts on coaching and really document my own coaching journey, which was the genesis of my tennis coaching. And over the past 4 years, I've really dived into the ecological dynamics space. And 4 years ago, we were just sort of in lockdown. And to be honest, I was pretty done with tennis at that point. I had a pretty good job, well-paid job, quite an easy job. But I was really burnt out with tennis and tennis coaching. And I've done lots of videos and stuff on this before, but tennis coaching didn't really make much sense to me because here we have this very open, dynamic, quite challenging sport, but yet we coach it in a very linear, isolated, and quite paint by numbers way. And it didn't really resonate that well with me. And like I mentioned before, I just coached the way that everyone else around me coached. I never really questioned it. And it wasn't until I stumbled across a webinar on constraint-led coaching. Because at the time at lockdown, I did a sports psychology online course because everyone had a lot of time to kill. I was looking at different sport and psychologies, and I just stumbled over this webinar by a guy called Richard Shuttleworth. And he talks about the constraint-led coaching and how by coaching traditionally explicit instructions and isolating techniques wasn't very effective. And by learning skill or skill acquisition, as I now know it's called, through play has much more effect. And that really resonated with me because my first love is football. And coming from just outside of Liverpool on the Wirral, you played lots of street football. I played football to a good level, which would probably be Premier League Academy Junior level now. And I played for at the Everton Academy, and I was a pretty decent player. But I never had any coaching within football. I just learned by playing with my mates. I learned by playing in lots of different environments with generally people who are older than me, because you just played football with the kids who lived in your street, and I was the youngest by far in my street. But I just learned football that way. And it wasn't until I actually went to the academy and started getting coaching that I kind of fell out of love football a little bit. Because here again, I was so used to just being creative and finding my own ways to score goals. And then I went to this academy and it was very much dribbling around cones. And I I just didn't really do it very well, to be honest. I couldn't really get my head around, well, the cone's not moving and I've got to dribble around it. It makes no sense to me because I was such a, maybe you call it kinesthetic. Like I learned by the feel of the game, and I learnt by finding spaces where defenders wasn't expecting me to be, and it was all very linear and structured football coaching. I'm not saying that's why I didn't make it as a player. I didn't think it helped because I didn't follow instructions very well. I'd always get told off for straying out of position or doing things a little bit different. And when I look back now in reflection, I learned lots of sports that way. I learned how to play volleyball, basketball, athletics. I just learned by playing in the street with my friends, and people say I was always naturally very sporty. I just had an upbringing where we just played. We just played out. We played with friends. We played lots of different sports. And I think that's why 4 years ago I stumbled across that webinar with Richard Shuttleworth. It was, yeah, you know what? I learned most of my sporting skills through play. And that really resonated with me. So over the past 4 years, I've been looking at this ecological dynamics approach. And I'm going to say straight off the bat, I am not a sports scientist. I look at the science, I try to understand it at a very Steve Whelan simple level. People might call it bro science. I just interpret the science in my own way. And I'm not, and some people may look at it and go, yeah, but that's not technically 100% accurate what you're saying. So it's up to you to go on your own journey and look at the science. And the thing about any type of paper or scientific research you look at, it's how you perceive it. But yeah, I just want to put out there, I'm not an expert in this field, but I am what I call a practitioner. I am currently using the themes and the styles of the ecological dynamics and the constraint-led approach. I'm using those themes within tennis, which is still very rare. Not a lot of tennis coaches are doing it. It's getting more popular with more and more coaches now sort of embracing this way. But that's a bit of my background and how I have found myself presenting to you today. So I've got some learning objectives. Again, these are based on the face-to-face. Some of them may not be easy to translate, but I want to try and bridge the gap between practice and the game. Because again, we've all had that lesson where we have worked on, I don't know, the forehand, and we isolate the forehand in a very traditional route. We may use the hourglass where we close a drill, progress it, bring it into a game. And we spend a lot of time drilling or isolating skills and we improve it. But then when we get back into a match, those skills disappear. Why? There has to be a reason why. And I've done thousands of lessons at this point where that's happened. I've isolated the skill. I developed the ability to perform the forehand or the backhand or the volley, and it disappears. And what happened? What's happened in the space of 5 minutes? And that's one of the questions I was always asking myself. Like, how are these skills not transferable? And we do the obvious. We blame the player, not listening, not trying, not being brave enough to try it under a bit of challenge, but it's probably the coaches. So how can we bridge that gap? And to bridge that gap, we got to make sure that we have more effective practices. So I'm going to use the word practice design because I don't really want to use the word drill. And we'll look at that in a few moments of why I'm trying to avoid using the word drill. But how do we design these practices then that are more transferable into the game? We're going to focus on the serve because the vast majority of coach education that you do is no one goes near the serve because it's difficult, it's complex, it's unique in terms of everyone serves different ways as well. And it's normally developed in a quite boring way. And I'm going to look at, okay, how can I make the serve not only exciting to practice, but make it more representative and the skills in which we learn can transfer more effectively as well. And then you may then go away and design your own practice designs. So that's probably one of the objectives we won't be able to cover on this workshop recording because the coaches on the face-to-face workshop get to go out for half an hour and design their own practice designs and share as well. So this is the game that we know and love. Just watch the clip. It's quite a long clip, but to me, this is what tennis is all about.
an energy-sapping rally, to say the least.
Wow. What I did say that's quite a long point to kind of debunks a little bit of the Craig O'Shaughnessy stats of average rally being 4. But wow, what an amazing point. And I think if I was to say everything that I love about tennis is pretty much in that clip. This is how we coach it. So this is me delivering a coach qualification course here in the UK. And obviously I'm following the guidelines of how to do it. But this is how we coach tennis traditionally.
Cross court forehand. And we got a neutral ball. Okay, don't worry, it's okay. Literally come straight on. So take it easy, warm up first. Cross court forehand. Here we go, get around it. Oh, that's much better. Took the ball nice and early, good timing. Even.
So there we have the traditional coaching way. So what do we notice between the two clips? Well, let's look at the first clip. Very open situation. We have a serve, we have a return. Then we have different phases of play. Sometimes players are in attack, sometimes are in defense, sometimes it's neutral. Lot to change direction, lots of decisions to make. And players are trying to find ways to win. There's also an opponent on the court as well, and the opponent is actually have an effect in the situation, in the environment. In the second clip, our traditional coaching way, we have no serve, no return. We go straight into the middle of the point. So already starting to isolate stuff here. You may notice from the clip that I'm telling the player what to do. Cross-court forehand, short ball into space. So there's no decision making to be done. I'm giving the players all the answers. And there's a very clear way of how to perform the drill. There's a huge difference there between the two. And for me, I say we have ballet in what I'm doing in the second clip, where very explicit instructions, how to move around the ball, exactly what to do, when to do it. And then we have a mixed martial arts fight. So mixed martial arts, if you're not familiar, is a combat sport where you can pretty much do anything you want within the rules. You can grapple, you can strike, you can fight on your back, fight on top, fight standing up. There's lots of different ways to have a fight, pretty much like a tennis match. There's multiple ways in which we can play. But yet we coach it in a very linear, very straightforward and very isolated way. And that's what we're going to try and explore now in this video. So I would class the second video as a drill. And we have to understand where the word drill comes from. And from my very primitive research, a lot of early sports coaching, when sports coaching started to really become a thing in the early 1900s, we looked at military style drills. And the thought process back then was, if you repeat the action over and over again, the soldiers will be able to perform it within a combat environment. So if they just did it over and over again, muscle memory will kick in and they'll be able to do it under challenge. And they just drilled it and they went over repetition, 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 repetition. And there's a story that I was reading about the charge of the Light Brigade. And back then, the soldiers would fight with sabers. And big part of military training with a saber was it was all numbered and almost choreographed. So if I did a thrust, let's call that a 2, you could then do a parry, and let's call that a 4. And for every move, there was a counter move to do it. And within this battle, the Charge of the Light Brigade, one of the medics wrote a journal blog, I believe, or post of he went onto the battlefield and the soldier was bleeding from the head. And the medic goes on and speaks to the soldier. And part of the thing, the training is to keep the soldier calm, keep them talking, keep them conscious as they tend to the wound. And the medic said to him, "Oh, what happened to you?" He said, "Well, I got into a duel and the enemy did a thrust, a 2. So I tried to do my parry, my 4, but the enemy then just bashed me over the head." And what that again, shows us a little bit in the heat of battle, expect the unexpected. We don't just, not yet anyway, we're not AI. We don't just follow these programming. We don't follow a very linear process. When the battle and when the heat is on, we need to make decisions. And that was the early style drill. So when people started to go into sports coaching, when sports coaching starts becoming a professional or a hobby, they just look back at that military style training, high repetition, high authority, just repeat the action over and over and over again. But the issue with drills is there's very repetitive movements. Decision making is taken away. So again, going back to the military style, okay, we don't want you to think for yourself. We want you just to be able to repeat these movements over and over and over again. And there's a clear right and wrong way. And I get it to some degree. And again, I'm not a military person, but in the military, like, and they are going to be under high challenge and high pressure. But tennis isn't quite life or death. And research shows us that when we're looking at learning dynamic skills, so variable movements, when an environment is consistently changing, repeating the same thing over and over again is not very effective. The transfer of training is limited because you're training it in a very sterile, very isolated, and very easy environment. Tennis, we know, is an ever-changing environment. If we look at the original video of two female pro players, there's a high variability in movements. They're not moving in the same way over and over again. They're hitting multiple forehands and backhands, but there's always slight nuances to each one. They're not always hitting the same type of shot. They're not always hitting the same space. They're not always hitting the same type of ball in terms of speed and spin. They're constantly making lots of decisions. When do they go down the line? Do they attack? Do they defend? Do they go quicker? Do they go slower? Faster? More spin? Less spin? Do they come forward to the net? Do they stay back? There's multiple decisions to make. And there's multiple options to the same solution. So it's what we call repetition without repetition. They're looking for the same outcome, but they're looking at multiple solutions. So there's a massive disconnect there between how we practice and train tennis and how we play tennis. I get it from all the research I've done, the very traditional ways rooted in that military style training. It's not very representative. It doesn't look and feel like the game that we play. And the transfer of training, as we said, is pretty limited. And for me, this is the biggest one. It's very rare do players say to me, can we do that drill again, Steve? It's generally, can we play that game again? So again, does anyone really like drills and just doing something over and over and over and over and over and over again? Again, the 10,000 hours and all the 10,000 repetitions, that's been misplaced within sports coaching. It's not very effective for a dynamic movement. And we also get confused with education. So in education, similar to the military style training, education, especially in the UK, was all based around getting children ready to go and work in the workhouses or the factories. So very mundane work. You just had to follow instructions. You had to be able to follow a process. So you have to do A, B, and C, and you repeat it over and over again. You listen to someone in authority, your boss or the workhouse owner, whoever it may be, going back a couple of 100 years maybe. And that's what education was. So our framework, our mindset of how we learn is completely distorted because we just think about how we learn certain things. And I get into lots of heated discussions online with guitar players and people who teach modern language. Yeah, but Steve, I break it down, I repeat it over and over again, and they learn that skill. And yes, some skills you can learn that way. But tennis is an open, dynamic environment. Think back to that first clip of the pro players. It's a different cognitive process, which we'll look at a little bit later on. It's not the same type of learning. And we have this warped mentality because, again, it goes back to what I said before, but the coaches are my coaches. I coached how other coaches in and around me did it. So we think about learning and we look at our own education, our own learning process, our own learning journey. And we think we can just do the same for this dynamic game that we play. It's not the same. And we'll look at why today. So here are some of my golden rules of play before we get into looking at some of the drills. So when I'm looking at my practices, I want them to be play. Now, some coaches get really scared of the word play because they just think silliness. Oh, the kids are just playing. Well, they're playing tennis. There's a reason why we say, let's play tennis, because we have a go at it. We try new things. That's what I mean by play. I don't mean just be silly and play games that have no context. Can they play around with tennis? And these are my golden rules when I'm looking to design my practices. The players must have decisions to make. There has to be decision-making process. And we'll look at through the drills in a few moments what I put in place to help that decision-making process. There has to be variability. There has to be multiple solutions to problems, or there might be multiple problems and even more solutions to make. There has to be variability in the practice. I don't want a player to know 10 ways to hit a forehand. I want them to be able to find an 11th way if they need to. Can they find their own solution? It must be competitive. Too often do we practice cooperative or unopposed practice where there's no consequence. The great beauty about tennis, go back to that first clip that I showed, both players are competing. They're trying to beat the other one. They're not making sure they can hit the ball nicely. They're not putting the ball in ideal positions. They're trying to apply pressure to force an error or force an easier ball on their side. But we don't train that way. Let's get to 10. Let's rally to 10. Let's rally together. And if you're a coach, you may rally with your player to make them look and feel good. Was a great quote I once heard from a coach. That's not the game. The game is I'm trying to beat you and you're trying to beat me. So it has to be competitive. My role as a coach is to set the problems. And I think with the traditional style of coaching, and again, don't mean any disrespect, but I think it's important that we have in my mind, there's a difference between the traditional way of coaching and this way of coaching. My job is to set the player the problems. I'm going to create an environment which has either multiple problems or a very big problem. Your job is to find the solution. And the first 10, 12 years of my coaching, I was opposite. I was giving the player solutions. Oh, when this happens, you go down the line. Oh, when that happens, you serve out wide. But that's great if all those stars align and it's all perfect conditions. But no two tennis shots are ever the same. No two matches are ever the same. If I play you today, I could win 6-love, 6-love. We play tomorrow and you might beat me 6-love, 6-love. No two matches are the same. No two sets are the same. Everything tennis, and what I love about it, it's this ever evolving and changing environment. 1 minute you're playing the sun's out, next minute it starts to rain. One player loses their level, one player seems to grow in their level. So it's a constant evolving situation. So they're my golden rules of play. And in the face-to-face workshop, this is a warm-up that we do. And hopefully you'll see some of this in it. There'll be multiple decisions to make. There's high variability. It's competitive and there's problems and solutions. So the warm-up is called Spotlight. There's no sound on this because I'm going to talk over it. So the way it works, the way it's set up, it's already a little bit in motion. We've got some spots on the outside. That's where the players want to be. In the middle, we have a single spot. That's where the players don't want to be. And this is a bit like musical chairs. The players on the outside have to change their spot. They can't just stand on the spot. Once one player moves, everybody has to move. And once everyone starts to move, the player in the middle is going to try and stand on one of the outside spots. When all the spots are full, whoever's left has to go to the middle. Let's watch it. So you got the player in the white trainers is now in the middle. The players on the outside will move. There we go. So they're moving. So they've gone pretty boring and gone round in circles. But then you see, look, with the player in the cap, they were quite brave and they tried to go across. I'm going to play it again. So this is great because you've got problems, you got decisions, you've got a lot of perception going on because the players are watching each other. So they're reacting to the environment around them. You then have a little bit of bravery. So the guy in the cap goes quite brave. And you see here, the guy in the cap actually goes to go across the far side. Then the guy in the green goes across, but the spot's already full. So again, the player is constantly watching the perception and the spacing around him, and then they're making decisions when to move. So even in my warm-up, I'm creating a problem. Can you get out the middle? If you're on the outside, can you ensure that you always find the spot? And of course, the players at the start were quite safe and just going around in circles. And then I'll challenge him. Okay, well, can you make more different decisions? Can you actually challenge yourself and get to a further away spot rather than going to the one to the left or the right? Could you maybe miss a spot? Could you maybe go cross court like the player in the cap did? So I'm creating the environment even within the warm-up. And this is much better than doing laps, surely. Laps or dynamic stretches. Because I'm getting the players to very quickly engage with the environment and straight away make decisions. There's lots of variability in there as well. And it's problems and solutions. And now we're going to look at the serve. And people say to me, yeah, but can't really coach the serve because it's quite boring. And most coaches will leave the serve to the last 10, 15 minutes of a session, which blows my mind because when you play tennis match, you're serving every other game. In a tiebreak, you're serving every two points. Or your opponent will serve two, then you will serve for two. So you're serving all the time. Yet we practice the serve for like, what, 10%, 15% of the lesson. That just makes no sense to me. And coaches, oh, it's a complex movement, Steve. There's lots of body parts going on. It's pretty boring because we have to isolate it. We have to make the player stand still. Really difficult for players as well because there's lots of failure going on with the serve because even the best players only get 6 out of 10 serves in. So there's lots of failure. It's quite isolated. If it's cold, you don't really want to serve and stand still. It's quite boring. But we have to be really careful with this because it's quite an important shot for the game. So the most common rally length in tennis, what do you reckon it is? Have a little think. Most common rally length. It's 1. The most common rally length, according to Shane Craig O'Shaughnessy, if you look at his stats, brain game tennis, it's 1. It's very rare do we actually get engaged past the serve. And with any of these stats that I may throw out at you, there's lots of research going into all different levels, pro, juniors, beginners, reds, orange, greens. And no matter what level you do the analysis on, these rally lengths don't really change. The skill level changes. Obviously, a pro player and a club player will have a different level of skill. But in terms of the numbers, they're roughly the same anyway. So if the serve is so dominant in terms of it goes in and never comes back, why do we practice it so little? Average rally length in tennis. This one most people now know is 3.8. And again, people think, we look at that clip before and go, yeah, that rally was a lot longer. But if you take every single point that's played on the tour, this is what the average is. So again, if ball 1, the serve, ball 2, the return is so important, why are we practicing it so little? Because it's complex, it's boring, it's difficult, it's isolated, they're standing around doing nothing. And the most common pattern of play most players use now is serve +1. With most of the players getting the ball in the forehand between 60 and 70% of the time. So they'll hit the serve and look to use their forehand straight away. So when we practice the serve, and we'll look at a clip in a minute, do we practice any of this? And this is the first one. So this is how we normally coach the serve. So I'm actually off camera here. This is my player. He's one of the coaches on the workshop recently. And all I've got him to do is, okay, we're going to work on your serve today. And this is a classic tennis coach traditional way. Player on their own, no one down the far end, and the player's just going to hit serves. Good serve. Ball went in, right? Out wide as well. Pretty nice. I'll be a classic coach. There's me walking around, looking at different angles, getting different views. So pretty successful so far. Yeah. And fair play to the coach there, because he didn't he's not hit any shots or any balls so far. I've just literally thrown him in front of a group of 10 coaches, and he's serving, and 3 out of 3. Very traditional way of coaching. Last 10 minutes of the session, see that every day. And the coaches can then make some technical adjustments and give some interventions of how to improve the technique. Okay. It's a huge issue. There's a huge thing missing here. How does the player here know where to serve? How does the player here know when to serve? How much pace? How much spin? Where about in the box? Because there's absolutely nothing down the far end to help him make those decisions. I believe this is generally quite easy, because there's no... Sorry, my battery. There's no challenge there, is there? From the player down the far end. So how can we make this from a okay practice to a good practice? Oh my word, I've added a returner. I know it may blow your mind. I know you've really signed up for this workshop and webinar for me to like bring out something as amazing as add a returner in. But why do we practice serve unopposed? Oh, because I'm working on the technique. The issue is with working on the technique, once you introduce a returner, you're going to change the behavior of this player. Because now, even if this player is not fully self-aware, they're taking in the information of the returner. How far back are they standing? How close are they standing? Are they standing towards the center or towards the right? That's helping him make a decision where to serve. And it's really important that the returner hits the return as well, because I want this player as well to get more information. So how many returns are they making? So he's gone twice to the backhand and the backhand's landed short. And just by putting a returner down there, one, it gives the server more context. It gives them an idea of, okay, where to serve, when to serve, how to serve. But how effective is that serve? Because if the return is absolutely nailing it, then he's got no choice. And that's what I'm saying here in the clip. Like the returner is also adaptable. So you'll see the returner now start to move around a little bit as well, because they're adapting to the serve. And now you'll start seeing more mistakes. You may see some of the pace coming off the ball as well. And it's interesting that he still keeps going out towards the backhand side. And all I've done in that situation is just included a returner. For me, this is the basic practice of the serve. You can't practice the serve without a returner. Well, you can. But again, the quality of the transfer of training is going to be minimal. Now, some people get quite heated online with me and say, yeah, but if I've got no partner, you're telling me that's pointless. Listen, hitting serves without a partner is better than not hitting any serves. But the transfer of training is minimal. It's not very effective. Once you introduce the returner, you will change the behavior. It's natural. It's like when you go into the lion's den and there's no lion. Yeah, you're going to be quite relaxed and quite chilled. Once you put a lion in there, your awareness completely changes. So that's the first thing I've done. So I've now dialed it up a little bit more. And just by introducing a returner, the transfer of training is going to be a little bit higher. Because now it's starting to look and feel a bit more like tennis. Now this player is using lots of information where the return starts, how they're returning, what opportunities they may get on ball 3, and how efficient and effective their serve is. And all I've done at this point is just put a returner down the far end. And if I'm doing a private lesson, then I would go down that end. I would hit the returns. I wouldn't stand this side with the returner. The only time I would stand on this side if I feel, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on, there's too many choices at the moment. And sometimes if you've got too much choice, it can overwhelm the player. But more often than not, I'm trying to see, can the player do it on their own? So once the player gets a little bit of success, I'm going to dial up a little bit now. I'm going to add a little bit more challenge onto the context. And too often we train without context. We train without cause and effect. We train without consequences. And what I've done in this situation is I have now made it into a bit of a game. So server versus returner. The service task, their job here is to get 4 first serves in a row. If they get the serve in from the right or the deuce half of the court, they go across to the advantage side. And to win the set, they've got to get 4 in a row. Now, the condition is, has to be a match-ready first serve. So you can't just tap it in 4 times. The returner's job, again, is just for context. He's just, at this stage, just to return the ball. Pretty good serve. That's 1. Okay. Yeah, it's got to change sides. So you just got to get 4 in a row. Easy, right? Yeah, there we go. Here we go. He's on 2. He's looking confident in it. He's stepping up. He's looking confident. Oh, here we go. He's got his set point here. And you can't hear from the audio, but the coach is going, ooh. And I'm like, just to win this one. Ah. And I'll play that again just as I'm talking over it. This is a great one because 4 serves, 15, 30, 40 game. We know that if we get the first serve in, we got, I think, about 67% chance of winning a point. It's quite an important thing to do. And all I've done here is introduced a task constraint of you'll get 4 in a row to win the game. And what the coach said was he felt really confident the first 2. He said he felt a little bit tighter on the 3rd one, and the 4th one he got really tight. He got really nervous, despite the fact that this is not a match. This is not, it's not worth anything really. And we just added up. We just raised the intensity of the mindset of the player. And you can play around with this one any way you want. Like, I'll play it one more time as I'm just talking through. You could say, okay, well, if the returner returns the ball deep, then you lose the point as well. Because you could just roll the serve in and the returner absolutely nails it. So you may put a restriction on where the returner you have to force the returner either to miss the serve or leave an easier ball free. So again, the great thing about the ecological dynamics approach is you can play around with it any way you want by looking at the players in front of you. And what would happen in a lesson here is once this player misses the 4th one, then his opponent has an opportunity to win the set. Then his opponent will then serve for 4 the other way. And again, we're just playing around with, okay, can the player now develop the serve here under some real challenge in terms of score pressure? And that's the thing that we really talk about within coaching. I will serve differently 40 love up than I will love 40 down. I will serve differently against a break point against me than I will having a break point for me. And how often do we play around with the score constraint within tennis coaching? Very rarely. And all I've done here is I've put a returner, I've put a scoring system. They've got to get to a certain number of points to win, a bit like what we call tennis. And the player is now developing the serving action under a bit of challenge. And you may say, yeah, but where's the technique, Steve? Why aren't you working on the ball toss? Why aren't you working on the throwing action? Well, how the player wins the game is up to them. If it's just getting it in, then the player is going to find a movement solution. We'll call it technique. They'll find a technique just to get it in. Then if I say, well, if the returner gets the ball back into a certain position, if the returner gets the ball deep and attacks you off the return, then you lose the point. So now can you find a way of hitting the serve and making the returner give you a short ball? And there's multiple ways you can do it. Speed, spin, placement, direction. Find a way. And then what I might do is try and help the player. Again, you can't hear the audio here, but in the next clip especially, I start to help the player a little bit of finding more suitable solutions. So I'm getting the player to find their own way. Not really talking about elbow at 90 degrees and stuff like that, because if they don't have a throwing action, the returner is going to get it back. If they've got a frying pan grip, they're going to be quite limited on actually trying to win the point. And what you have to understand is this way takes a little bit longer, it's a bit messier, it's a bit more chaotic, but it's going to transfer into a match more. Whereas if I go back to that first clip where he's serving to empty court, I could tell him to make technical movement changes and he'll do it. He'll do it because there's no challenge. Once you introduce a level of challenge, the behavior will change. So I'm getting to try and replicate movement solutions under some challenge. And the last one is one of my favorite ones. So the server's now dropped out. We've got another server in, and server's got to go cross court. But you may notice the returner is on the same side as the server. So I've put the returner out of position. The server's got to serve cross, and then they play the point out. Let me just play it through first, and then we'll talk through it. What I will point out here is the returner can change position as well. So the returner can either start on the same side or in the opposite tram lines. Because I want the returner to keep changing the look and feel of the environment. So why am I doing this? One, it's giving the server actually some challenge, because you don't see it in this clip, but when you do this on the workshop, I reckon the server misses 9 times out of 10 first one, because they think the perception is it's really easy. I've got an open court, right? If I just smash it out wide, they've got no chance. So he's probably thinking here, if I smash it down the tee, he's got no chance, and they'll miss. They'll miss because, again, the way of their seeing the court, it looks really easy. Some players, because it gives it a different look, this is quite off-putting, and that will force them to miss as well. What I want the server to do is look at the situation and then think about solutions. So the obvious solution here is slice serve down the center, because you think it's the furthest away. The rule I've put in place here is the returner can only move once the server starts their action. Once the server starts the action, they can't abort. They've got to hit it. So what starts to happen, you probably see it in a minute, the returner starts to move really early. So here we go. He's watching. Oh, he starts to move now. And that's quite good perception, actually, by the guy at the far end, because he almost waits to see where the ball's going. When you do this with the juniors, what you'll see is the juniors will just start running right across to cover the space. And what the smart servers will start to do is start serving back in behind or jamming them up. So just by changing the look and feel of the court, we're giving the server multiple decisions. The server's got to try and find different solutions here. So do they go out wide? Do they go back into the body? Do they go flat? Do they use slice? And they're working on multiple solutions to multiple problems. The great thing about this as well is the returners working on loads here. The returners working on their perception skills, looking at the server, trying to anticipate where they're going to go. They're also working on the reaction skills. They're going to have to defend some. They're going to have to you might get an opportunity to attack some. Now, obviously, you don't start in these positions in a real life match situation. However, we're training skill here. We're trying to develop more skillful, adaptable, and versatile players. Because when you're returning serve in a match, that's what you need, right? You need to be adaptable. You need to be versatile. You've got to find different ways of just getting that ball back and getting the ball back safe. And all we've done in these couple of examples of the drill videos is just shown you different ways. Okay. And when you do these activities or these practices with your players, they'll absolutely love them because they're fun. One, it's challenging. Two, it's completely different than they've ever done before. But you're developing such a deeper level of skill and awareness and perception and action. It's not isolated. It's not difficult. It's not boring. It's fun. It's dynamic. And hopefully in those couple of examples, we've given the server decisions to make. In that first clip where there was no returner, there's no decisions to make. It's an empty box. I can hit it any way I want. There's no real cause or effect. If I don't get the serve in, I can say I never go. There's no consequence. And once you put a returner there, how and when am I going to serve? I've got to get 4 serves in. That then add more decisions to make. Getting the returner to go in different positions. Okay, now I even got more decisions to make. It's high variability. There's no one way to do those games. There's multiple ways to do it. And each player can find their own movement solutions to the problem. Some players will hit quicker. Some players will slice. Some players will take some pace off. There's multiple ways in which to play the game. All those activities are competitive. You probably notice that apart from the one which was serve and return, and we could even have a score on that. So if the server gets the returner to miss or returns to a certain area, the server scores. If the returner gets the ball to a certain position, the returner scores. So we make that competitive. All the other ones, you can just play the point out afterwards and keep score. So can the server get 4 points to win the set? Can the server win, I don't know, two points in a row? Can they win 3 points in a row, which gives you a 98% chance of winning the game? So you can add and play around with the scoring. My job there is I'm just setting the players' problems. Okay, this is the game. These are the rules of the game. Let's find a way of playing. And that's the player's job. The player's job there is to find the solution. Can we find a way of actually working out how to win this game? And those solutions are unlimited, really, because the player is going to find their own way. And we're not looking at grips and elbow positions and stuff like that. The player just finds their own way. And I say this a lot, but give me 2 players in the world who serve the exact same way. Sampras serves different to Federer. Agassi serves different to Tiafoe. Medvedev serves differently than most people. Roddick had one of the most unconventional looking serves in the world. It was pretty effective though, right? So players find their own way. And yes, there will be some basic movement parameters, but each player will have their own degrees of freedom within that as well. Some players might have a 90-degree elbow bend. Some players might not. Some players might have an 85 or 80. I'm not going to go too deep into the science there, but definitely look into the degrees of freedom. There's only certain ways the body can move to get a ball to go from high to low. So that's why everything kind of looks the same from a biomechanical point of view, because the way the body is designed to get the ball to go low to high on a forehand, for example, my racket's got to move from low to high. So there's only a certain range in which my racket can move to get the outcome of the ball. That's why it looks the same. However, each player will have their own degrees. So you can't say to a player, elbow at 90 degrees, because each player will have a different degree. And that's why I call sometimes tennis coaching is an illusion. We present these activities and we coach in a way in which we sound like the authority. We're given biomechanical information. We look like we're passing on knowledge. But if we're doing it in an explicit, isolated, sterile way, it's not transferring to training. It's fake coaching. And I think the way, and some coaches get a little bit annoyed, I call it fake coaching, but if the degree of transfer is low, then why are we doing it that way? Surely we want to train as closer as possible to the game. And these are just some tennis myths that you need to learn a technical base. And I've just mentioned now that as humans, there's only certain ways we can move the body. And with biomechanics, and I'm not, people think that I'm very anti-biomechanical, but I'm not. There's definitely more efficient ways in which we can generate force. There's more efficient ways in which we can generate speed and spin. There's definitely more efficient ways we can move. But there's no one way. There's multiple ways of doing it. And I think sometimes we get this idea in our head, oh, to play tennis, you need to learn how to rally first. Well, first of all, players don't really want to rally. I don't want to hit 10 balls of you and then try and beat you. I want to try and beat you on the first shot. Oh, yeah, but you need to learn the basic grips and the stance. Look at a picture of or video Djokovic hit 10 forehands in a row. Everyone looks different. The base that you're talking about, we have already as humans. By the time they get to the tennis court, they understand how they move their own body. To get a ball to go up, I mentioned before, I have to go low to high. There's only a certain range in which I can do that. I understand that already. So my technical base I've already got. Between the ages of 0 and the ages of 4 to 5, when I come to your lessons, I've already got my technical base, my movement base. It's called human evolution. It's how I'm learning to move and adapt to my environment. I don't need to learn a basic forehand because there's no such thing as a basic forehand. High repetition goes back to the drill aspect before. No two shots are the same. Tennis is not a highly repetition sport. And I used to say this quite a lot as a coach. Oh, tennis is about repetition. Repeat, repeat, repeat. If you repeat that forehand 10,000 times, you just be able to do it subconsciously. And you use the cognitive and associative and automatic sort of stages of learning. It's not the same. I need repetition without repetition. I need to get the same outcome over and over again. That's the repetition that I want. How I achieve that is through variable movements. I need multiple ways to get the same outcome. It's not just hit the same forehand over and over again. You can break down complex dynamic movements. Now, there's a little bit of play around here. There's a thing called the Bernstein degrees of freedom. So when you're working with a red player, you're not going to teach him the fully fluid, quite dynamic forehand with the hip and shoulder rotation and leg drive and stuff, because one, they physically won't be able to do it. So what you do in that situation is you may isolate certain movements and you may just get the racket behind the ball and push it. Okay, so that's pretty good. Breaking it down, that's isolating the degrees of freedom. You're taking away the variability, which we'll look at a little bit in a few moments. What you can't do is decouple things. So you can't work on sending the ball without working on the receiving the ball. You can't work on the ball toss without the racket. You can't work on forehand shadow swings without a ball. So you can't break things down and put it into more dynamic movements or environment. That's not to say that you can't isolate certain movements and make it a bit more achievable. Like you may not teach a beginner a full swing on the serve. They may go from here and just punch it. That's probably good coaching. to start to get an understanding. When I talk about breakdown complex movements, you can't decouple sending and receiving. You can't take the ball out of context. You can't do shadow swings. You can't dance around to music and sort of a clip that I got sent you for a week. We have one dominant way of learning. Again, something that's in quite a lot of coaches' cases. So visual, verbal, kinesthetic. To play and learn the game, you need to use all your senses. You can't just rely on playing. You're going to have to quite tuned in to what you see visually. You're going to have to tuned in to the noises in and around the court, the ball bouncing, stuff like that. So there's no one dominant way of learning. Giving the players instructions is best. Goes back to what we talked before about the teaching. How we're taught in school. Someone stands at the front, they give you the answers. Your job is to remember them and write them down, and then hopefully transfer them into a test at the end of the year. We don't learn these type of skills that way. We learn by doing, by playing, by making lots of mistakes. And giving the players solutions creates a very shallow level of learning. It's like if I was to give you the answers to an upcoming English or maths exam, you probably pass the exam. When you need to use those skills in a real world situation, you'll struggle because you don't know the context in which you use them. If it's an isolated question, you'll be able to answer it. And I always relate back to this trying to learn Spanish. Like I speak very badly broken Spanish, and I can do it. And I did it really well in a school environment when someone's asking me a question. ¿Cómo te llamas? Oh, me llamo Esteban. But then when you get into a real life situation and you're interacting with someone and you don't have that deeper level of understanding, very difficult to replicate. And a coach knows best. And this is a big change in my coaching. I said before, I used to give the solutions, now I give problems. And sometimes I would watch players and I would give an opinion, but I don't know what they've seen. I haven't seen the situation through their eyes. I haven't seen what they've seen. I don't understand what helped them make those decisions. Why did they go down the line on that shot? To me, it looks dead obvious, and you see this all the time from parents at the side of the court. Oh, I can't believe they hit that shot. It was dead easy. It's easy for us because we're not in the context of the game. We don't understand and we don't see what the player sees. We don't feel what the player feels. So I probably don't know best. The player, my job here is to help guide the player to making better decisions. And this is the reality of tennis. No ball ever comes the same way twice. Height, speed, spin, direction, and depth will always change. Every single shot is different. I did a great post of Nadal recently on Instagram at my tennis coaching. Every ball's different. So why do we replicate and do high repetition of single balls? Makes no sense. Most errors are a failure of adaptation, not a breakdown of technique. And I'm really playing around this at the moment. I think most errors are a breakdown in decision making, or they haven't adapted to the situation. So classic example is a player gets given a really hard, flat forehand deep onto their forehand, and they try and take a big C shape and big long swing, high follow through, and they send the ball 7 miles out because they've tried to do a movement solution that they've been taught, but the ball they're given doesn't allow them to do it. If you watch any experienced player, they'll defend, they'll probably shorten up, they'll block or punch or slice that ball back. They haven't got time for the big swing, so they'll just adapt and change. So the failure is not the technique as such, it's the adaptation, realizing how to move is the failure. Your opponent's trying to win. If we take the opponent out of the game, it's not playing tennis. It's unopposed practice. The opponents, like I said on the screen there, they're trying to break your contact, they're trying to get off balance, trying to force you into making the wrong choice. So when we coach these players, if we're not trying to beat them, we're then doing them a disservice. And that's why I don't like hitting with my players anymore, because I will fall into the routine of making it too easy for them. I like players that hit with each other because it's more real. It's peer-to-peer sparring. They're trying to beat each other. And if we don't train that element of it, again, it's fake. It's an illusion. The environment's ever changing. Score, momentum, opponent, crowd, weather. How often do we try and change the environment? A lot of the time we're practicing in isolated and sterile environments. Everything's really pretty, everything's structured, everything's organized, everything's high repetition. The coach is in charge, they're telling you what to do. Like, how often do we throw some chaos into there? 1 minute you're serving 40 love up. Oh no, next point you love 40 down. Oh yeah, so you won the first set 4 love. Well, we're now going to imagine that you lost the first set 4 love. How's that going to affect your behavior? Do we try and change behaviors enough? Because I mentioned before, once you change the environment, you change the behavior of the player. And that environment's ever changing. And the transfer of training, I really generally believe that drills, as we know them in traditional coaching, do not equip players with the skill to meet the demands of the game. And one pushback I get a lot is, yeah, but if you watch Alcaraz train, or if you watch Iga train, they're doing lots of isolated drills, mate. They're doing lots of basket drills, and seeing it on YouTube where the coach not Gonzalez, Juan Carlos dropping the ball over and over again, and Carlos is just hitting it over and over again. Well, you have to understand that Alcaraz is not developing a wide range of skill at this point. He's done all that stuff. He is now the finely tuned F1 car, and he may be trying to work on something unbelievably micro specific that he may come across in a match later on that day. You also have to understand, when we see these clips of players practicing at events, they are not developing, they are maintaining. They probably have a half-hour practice, they might have half a tennis court sometimes, and they're just loosening up. I still would challenge, it's probably not a very effective way of doing it, but it's tradition. It's just, and you only have to go around now and you see a lot of players doing points play. What you don't see is these players developing new skills because they don't want the world to see what they're working on. You don't see a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, but it's nice to get an Instagram video of Alcaraz doing a drill and going, oh, if Carlos is doing it, I'll do it with my players. It's completely different. And I understand how it looks. It's like watching Manchester United train and then trying to use the same training methods with your under-8s football team at the weekend. Completely different level. It's a different world. To work on different things. So don't get dragged into, oh yeah, such and such always does it that way. And again, a classic one is Nadal. Oh yeah, Nadal did loads of basket drills as a kid. He did do loads of basket drills as a kid, but he also played a lot of tennis. He played a lot of matches. He played a lot of unstructured tennis. And I think sometimes as coaches, the ego takes over. Oh, all the coaching made Nadal who he is today. It's all the coaching. Probably not. Probably all the tennis he played. He probably made himself that way. So I understand the pushback, but I see it as a case of, well, the coaching will help. And we'll look at that in a few moments of how coaching can help. I'm not saying that you don't need any coaching. I think coaching can definitely help you along the journey. But players become great not because of the coaching. You only have to look at some of the best sports people in the world. Michael Jordan wasn't great by the coaching. Michael Johnson, the runner, wasn't great by his coaching. Tiger Woods wasn't great because of the coaching. They're great because they put in the work outside of the coaching. They play a lot of their sport. They play a lot of the game that they then specialize in, or the event they specialize in. Again, coaches take too much credit, I think, sometimes. I know that hurts the ego of some coaches as well. So at this point, we have a little break on the workshop. We're going to power through. But if you do want to pause it and go and grab yourself a tea or coffee and digest what I've said, now is a good time. So with all that being said, we've had a look at, okay, why traditional drills, I believe, don't transfer very well. They don't look and feel like the game. And a thing that I get hit with a lot, and I talk about this on social media a lot. Ah, Steve, you just play these silly games. You just play games. And I had it recently where coach goes, "Oh, mate, you would have loved my lesson the other day. I played games and the kids loved it." And I'm like, you do realize don't just play games, right? You do realize I'm trying to develop skill. You do realize I'm trying to develop players. I'm not just playing games. Like, I'm not just doing that service game just for fun. Like, I am trying to develop skill. So what skills do players need? So these are what I will look at when I'm looking at players. Okay, what skills do I need to help these players find? What players do I need? Sorry, what skills do I want these players to explore? First of all, perception. Perception is so important in tennis because we need to know where the ball's going, the effect that ball's going to have on our body and us from a physical and tactical point of view, the opponent's position. And you may throw in perception of the environment, the score, the weather, who's in the crowd. Like, we need to have a degree of the environment around us. We need to use our senses, visual, verbal, feel. We need those decisions. We need to be in tune more with our perceptional skills. That's going to help our anticipation, so our tactical awareness. So if I push you deep on a forehand and I see you getting pushed back, I might move further forwards because I'm seeing the cause and effect on you. I'm then taking movement solution. So I'm then trying to find a movement solution by moving further forwards. I'm anticipating a shorter ball back. That's linked into the perception to what's happening in front of me. I then need to start making decisions, but I'm using the environmental information to make those quick decisions. And a good way to think about this is like driving on the motorway or the highway. You are using your perception all the time. You're looking at all the cars, you're looking at spaces, you're looking at everything around you. You're anticipating other people's movements that you have no control over. Like, you're watching the Audi zigzag in and out of traffic. You're really aware of not getting too close to that car. You can almost sense when someone's going to slow down, slam on their brakes, because you may see lights up ahead, the brake lights. So we're using these perception, anticipation, decision-making skills all day. Even from a kid's point of view, when the kid walks into a tennis clubhouse and the clubhouse is full of tables and chairs, they need to make a decision how to get from the front door to the tennis courts. And they'll have to negotiate their way around the clubhouse. Some will take one route, some will take the other. What goes into that decision making process? Well, we're very aware of our surroundings. Like, a really thin player will pick the small gaps to go through. A slightly larger player will have to pick the bigger gaps. If you look at a flight of stairs and an escalator, some people who are a bit more physically fit may choose the stairs. Some players who aren't as fit may pick the escalator. The physically fit players may be really tired after a long day at work. They may take the escalator. Why? Because they're perceiving how much energy and stuff to use in that situation. Then they're making a decision what to do. That's what tennis players do all day. And it sounds pretty obvious and it's common sense, but do we really appreciate that type of things as a coach? Like, how often do we ask our players, how has your day been? Like, how's your day? Well, if I've had a really tough day, it's going to affect how I perform. If I've had a really good day, I'm really positive, it's going to affect how I perform. My perception of that environment is going to be different. If I'm really tired, like even tonight, I had a great night's sleep last night. So I'm really looking forward to going to work later on. My perception of that environment is different compared to Thursday when I was really tired. I could barely speak and my words are getting a little bit mumbled up. I was like, oh, I've got to go to work and perform. So my performance on both days is different based on how I feel, my perception, feeling. There's days when I go into work and there's loads of parents around and I'm really focused on the parents. And there's days when I go in and there's no parents. Again, my behavior will change. But do we really take that into consideration? And all those perception and anticipation decision skills, they will then have an effect on our perceptual motor skills. We think about motor skills like movement and stuff like that, coordination, agility, balance, speed. We think about those motor skills, but do we really appreciate what goes into those skills? And it's that perception, anticipation, decision making. And then, like we said a few times over this webinar, there's no one direct way to do it. So do we have very adaptive and versatile movements? I'm not sure. And then how often do we get the players to reflect? We know and understand that to learn, we need to make errors. We need to make mistakes. That's how we go through life. We buy a very expensive car at 18 that we can't afford. We have to send it back a few months later because we can't afford it. We've learned a mistake. We made a mistake. We learn a bit more about money. We order a lovely steak at the restaurant. They bring it out on a hot plate. They say, don't touch the hot plate. Why not? No, I'm going to touch it. It can't be that bad. You touch it and burn your hand. You got a scar on your finger. True story. Made that mistake again. You miss 10 forehands in a row. Okay, I've got to find a different way of doing this. Then you start to adapt and change how you hit the ball. That's all done by the player. As a coach, your job is to help and guide towards that. But how often do we get the players to reflect? Very little. But the question I'll throw out now is, well, when these players play tournaments, are you there? Are you there courtside telling them how to do it, how to react, how to adapt, how to change? Probably not. At the club making some money. Even this weekend, when I was at a tournament with my county team where I can actually actively coach at the end of sets, I can't really give the players too much information because I'm not in the battle. I can give encouragement. I can try and guide them towards a solution, but they've got to make that decision themselves. They've got to find their own way. And they can only do that if they're used to reflecting. They're used to feeding back. And I say hot and cold. So sometimes a hot reflections in the moment. If you miss a shot, hot reflect. But I also get them to sort of do what I call a cold reflection, maybe a couple of days later. Talk about it then. Because how we think about things in a heat of battle and how we look back on it in a couple of days is completely different. It's like when you get into an argument on social media and you're really amped up and you're really typing and it gets a little bit out of hand sometimes. And then you look back at a couple of days, oh, I can't believe I said that. Because our emotions play a big part in hot reflection. So maybe let's take a step back sometimes and do a cold reflection. But again, players need to learn that skill as well. And this is something that I'm really into at the moment. And it's the perception action coupling. So for a player to play tennis, they have to perceive the environment in and around them. So the perceptual information from the environment, we talked about this before, court position of the opponent, the score, the court surface, type of ball they're using, the weather conditions, all that information goes into the player. The player then has to use all those senses and all that information to bring it into action, into a movement. That movement will then have an interaction with the environment, and then the coupling starts again. And more often than not, as coaches, we focus so much on the action, how to hit a ball. We decouple this, we take it apart. But like we've said now a few times in this webinar, we cannot decouple perception and action. They are one process that we need the player to go through. If you decouple it, they'll get very good at the action. Once that perception element's brought in, you're going to get variable results here. And I think this is something that is not taught on coach education from what I'm aware of at the moment. The similar things, ready, read, react, but it really focuses on the ball. Read the ball. You need to look deeper in that. You need to perceive the whole environment around you. So with that being said, how do I design my practices? This is something that I use when I'm looking at practices. And the practices I set up before, this is what I use to design them. And it's based on some work by Newcomb, 2010. Credits down there at the bottom. Okay, how do I design my practices? So at the bottom is your classic single ball drill, your closed technique. So I know the LTA in the UK, they have a coaching hourglass where they'll start with a full game, they'll isolate the skill, and then if you flip this upside down, they'll open it back up to the full game. Well, I've used that process for 22 years. Doesn't work. Because once you isolate it, you'll develop the skill. By the time you get back to the full game, it disappears. Goes back to what I said before. Forehand, 40 minutes, isolate the skill, bring it to a game, disappears. But it's a nice, easy process to follow. However, you've got to be careful because some people say, "Oh, just get them to play tennis." Then a great thing fired at me at a workshop once was, "Well, you don't even need a coach then, do you, Steve? You just play tennis." If you're telling me that I can learn all these skills just by playing tennis, I don't need a coach. Not necessarily true, because the issue with a full game, it's high variability, really high. You've got multiple solutions, multiple problems, and that's where you get the overwhelm. So sometimes just playing the game has the same negative effect, transfer of training, as closing the game and isolating it. And the way I describe this to coaches a lot now is it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. So here in the UK, we love an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. Very nice food. But when you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, you've got multiple choices. You've got starters, you've got mains, you've got dessert, and you've got lots of different combinations. And what tends to happen, this is personal experience again, you get your plate, you go round, and you just pick everything you like, all the stuff that you like. But then when you sit down to eat it, it's just a mess. You've got rice, you've got noodles, you've got chicken, you've got sweet chicken, you got spicy chicken, you got beef, and you start eating it, and it's not so nice because all the flavors don't really complement each other. And then you sort of put it down and go, oh, I'm not going to eat that. It's all you can eat. I'll go and get another plate. And then you may start to put combinations that actually work together. And it's sometimes with tennis, when we're teaching the game to new players or even experienced players, if you're just playing the game and it's too open, there's just too much going on. It's overwhelm. But on the flip side, though, if we went to all you can eat buffet and all I had was chicken soup, I just gave you chicken soup. Okay, so you know what you're going to have. You may enjoy the first bowl, but after a while, chicken soup's going to get pretty boring. And that's what happens with closed drills. And if you only have chicken soup, when you get to all you can eat buffet, there's too much choice. Therefore, all you really want is probably chicken soup because that's what you're used to. You may start branching out. So a better way of going the buffet is to reduce the options. And you'll see restaurants do this all the time. Restaurants, if you ever watch Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, the first thing he does is reduce the menu. Because if there's too much choice, people get overwhelmed. They don't know what to pick. There's too many things going on. But if you reduce the menu and you just give people things that they probably like and that the more appealing, the more digestible, then it's easy to do. So this is what I tend to use my my funnel variability. I never want to be down the bottom. I rarely want to be at the very top. I always want to be toward the top end of the funnel. So an adapted game, it's like what we did before. So I reckon before we started off with a single ball drill where the player just hit the serves on their own. But on the next one, when I introduced the returner, I jumped right up the funnel. We got up to here where the players were working together, server versus returner. And then when they started playing the point out, then we had the opposed play. When we got the returner into crazy positions, we adapted the normal game. And this is where you can see here the players are learning the right balance of tactical and technical movement solutions. The variability isn't completely open. I'm working at the top end of the funnel. And what I'll do with my players is I'll take them up and down the funnel. And sometimes, again, I'm not saying that you should never go down here, but if you do find yourself down here, because you have to, if they've got absolutely no movement skill and very, very limited perception skills, you may have to go down here at the start, but don't stay down there. Don't stay down there. And research shows us it will only take you a handful of goes to get an idea of the movement. So you can open it up pretty quick anyway. But why do we stay down here? Because it looks good, mate. It looks good. It looks easy. You get loads of success. Player gets lots of confidence. But the transfer from here to there is minimal because of the different variability. So can you move your players up and down this funnel? And these are things that I ask myself. Is the player making decisions or just rehearse some preset movements? Goes back to before. They have to be making decisions. If I looked at this, very little decision making down here, lots of decision making up here. So can I get them making decisions that's not overwhelming them? Can they practice the same skill in several different ways? Can they get repetition without repetition? Are they practicing lots of different skills? So they may be working on the return, but can they maybe neutralize the serve? Can they defend a really big serve, but can they get opportunity to attack? Again, the game we used before, the returner has the options at all three there. How would this transfer to a game? Are they performing action against an opponent? Would they be able to perform the same skill within a match environment? And this is what I score my practices on. Again, this is based on some research down the bottom there. Low representative, so it doesn't look and feel like the game being trained. There's limited transfer of learning, and the main focus is on isolation or technique. I reckon the vast majority of tennis coaching you will watch or see will be one. Why? Goes back to what I said before. It's easy. It's easy to do. It's easy as a coach to do that. It makes us look like we know what we're talking about. It allows us to teach, makes the player improve really quick, but it won't make better tennis players. And people say, yeah, but you work in performance, so you're looking at making better tennis players. I think any player, when they play tennis, your job is to get them to be able to play tennis. And that play tennis, if I just go back, that play tennis is getting them to play here. And your job as a coach is to teach them in here so they can play that more. That's why you need a coach, because just playing the game is very challenging, especially with our game, with our sport. This is why we need coaches, to make sure you develop the skills in here to enable you there. What we don't want is coaches only teaching here. And then when the players play the game, it's the ballet to mixed martial arts fight again. So fully representative. So I reckon before with the tasks we looked at, we went from high representative and probably getting towards fully representative towards the end. So I'm always looking again in my area of being threes and fours. And there's times again, if I'm working with a brand new player, it may have to go down to a 2. I try not to stay there. And people say to me, yeah, but can you do that with like tots? Of course you can. I can play a similar game with tots where you get 2 spots, players start in line. I hit the ball off my spot, diagonal, and the other tot's got to go and stop it. I'm playing the same game as the serve and returner before. It's more representative to a game of tennis than hitting the ball to and through each other on spots, for example. So I'm going to share a couple more videos. I know there's a lot of theory in this webinar, but it's important that you understand what goes behind these games. It's not just playing games. There's a lot of actually goes into it. Okay, how can I really develop skill? What's the best way of me developing these skills? So this a couple of exercises we did in the workshop. So this one is 2 touches. First touch is control. Second touch, you've got to send it above head height. Has to be an overhead. So the issue we have a lot is, okay, ball toss, don't we, with serve? And players try and hit a ball toss, which is perfect, 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, throw the ball up, extend the arm. And we've seen the drills where the players put the racket down, they throw the ball up, hit the racket. Or even I've done a couple where you throw it up and you trap it against the fence. But the issue doesn't lie in the ball toss. It's the lack of adaptation of the player. So what I've got the players doing here is they're just adapting. They're adapting to a ball going above their head in lots of different ways. It's like if you're serving and it's windy, you're going to have to adapt. If you're serving into the sun, you're going to have to adapt. If you're serving 40 love up, you're going to have to adapt. So again, I'll just play it again. So this is a good, just fun, what I call a skill builder. I normally use this when we're warming up for the serve. Okay, well, can you just adapt here? And you've got lots of stuff going on. You've got attack versus defense. You've got the player on the left there took more than 2 touches because he had to. But we're teaching adaptive skills with an overhead movement. And not only am I benefiting the serve here, we're now starting to benefit the smash. And what you can see happening as the game goes on, you see the player here, they start to find ways of trying to cheat the system. So they're getting lower, maybe a little bit too low there from the right. But what a fun way to develop spatial awareness with our players. And the second one here is what we call differential learning. So the player in question, this is a live lesson, live player. So the player I'm working with here, he's placed some tennis balls around the court. I'm going to mute this one because it has got sound. And all he's got to do is serve the ball into the service box from multiple different positions. So what you can't see down the far end is he's got a target of 2 red cones. He's got to get the ball to bounce in the service box and then through the red cones. But because every ball's in a different place, he's going to have to adapt and adjust how he serves. He's going to have to adapt and adjust his movement solution. Again, really good for developing grip, really good for developing movement around the outside of the ball, which I was trying to do here. And classically, he goes out the shot for the next one. But you probably see him come back into shot now. No, he's still got a couple out wide. I think something knocked the camera. But there you go. He's got a couple deep ones. And you can't hear the sound, but I'm not giving him any instructions here. He's got the problem. He's got to find the movement solution. And again, the body is very clever. It will adapt to what's in front of him. He's trying to find a movement solution to achieve the outcome. Repetition without repetition. And then at this stage of the workshop, coaches would go out themselves and have a go. And then they'll come back and then they'll look at the representative practice design. And then we'd finish off with a game. And even though all the exercise and all the practices you've looked at have been quite competitive here, I think it's important that we always finish off with something that looks and feels like a game of tennis. Whether it be a tie break, whether it be a dice tie break. So one that I do on the course, which I didn't film, was okay, players get a 10-sided dice. They roll the dice, and whatever score you roll, that's how many points you need to win the tiebreak. So if I roll a 10 and you roll a 1, you need 1 point to win, I need 10. And that just puts a different psychological look and feel of a tiebreak. But we need to incorporate more of that type of training within our players, because that's what they're going to be faced with in match situations. And that almost brings us to the end of this webinar presentation. So hopefully we've met our learning objectives. We've bridged the gap between practice and performance. Hopefully I've given you a better insight on how I design my practice designs. I've given you some background, some science, some research, hopefully a little bit of theory, some method to the madness. We've looked at developing the serve. Hopefully you now can feel more confident to go off and develop your own personal private practice plans. If you do come to the workshops, you will be given these 2 free gifts. I will send you 2 free ebooks. One is Constraining 8 and Under Tennis. One is Mastering Doubles. So again, using this approach to coach 2 different age groups, under 8s And obviously doubles, maybe juniors, adults, club players, but using these practice designs. So hopefully if you have been on the workshops, you will have had these sent through via an email link. So please download them. If you're not already part of the Coach Academy and you have attended the workshop, and this is just a recap, please do consider the Academy. If you use the code MTCA Workshop, you will save $100 off the annual rate, not only for the first year, but for life. So you virtually just get the Academy for half price. Within the Academy, we have things like coach education webinars. We have a new webinar, a bit like this one, every single month uploaded. We have live coach roundtables where myself and other coaches within the Academy will jump on Zoom, we'll have a topic, and we'll just shoot the breeze. We'll just talk through the challenges, but also solutions to that as well. You will get lots of practice design videos, something that I'm currently uploading and trying to flesh out a little bit. So you'll see a lot of my real life practice designs with real life players. You also get my practice design downloads, checklists, ebooks as well. At the time of recording, we're approaching over 200 different types of practice designs within the Academy now, and that's only growing. I think by the year's end, we're going to be looking at 500 plus practice designs. And obviously, it's a worldwide community. I've got coaches all across the world now within the community, and what an amazing way to network and communicate, not just with myself, but other like-minded coaches as well. So head over to mytenniscoaching.com, click on My Tennis Coach Academy, and if you use the code MTCA Workshop, you will get $100 off. And that's about it. At this stage, take some photos and testimonials, and that just leaves me to say thank you. This is quite a long webinar. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Please leave any feedback to my email, steve@mytenniscoaching.com. And that's it. Really hope you've enjoyed it, and I will speak to you all again soon. Take care.